Hi, everybody. Welcome to this month's episode of Unlimited, where we interview people who are doing incredible things. We are here tonight with Brit Elders. She's an author and she's also a ghostwriter who she works with other people to write their books. And one of the books that has really called a lot of attention to her life and within the content of the book is also very prime right now, um, is a book about contacting aliens with the Pleiades. So this gentleman, he was a farmer, and he claims to have had hundreds of contact with the Pleiadians. And I want to introduce you, Britt. Thank you so much for joining us today. We've been
My
looking forward to
pleasure.
this. Awesome.
I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
Excellent. Oh, I see the book in the background of your
It's
shot.
hiding over my shoulder.
Well, I want to actually also give a shout out to Kyle, who organized this amazing interview today. So go ahead and just introduce everybody to this concept of what happened with this farmer and why it's so important and interesting.
Okay. On January 28th, 1975, this individual, Edward Billy Meier, was in Switzerland sitting at his kitchen table. He got a cooling sensation across his forehead, and then he heard a voice that urged him to go outside, get on his moped, and follow instructions, which he did. He actually got on his moped, took off into the forest, found a clearing, and was told to stop. He did. He listened. He looked, didn't see anything. Then he heard a sound, and the sound was something he had never heard before. He looked up. He saw this silvery craft. The sound continued, and the craft began to settle slowly until it settled on the ground. Behind the craft came a woman. She sat down with him. She introduced herself as Simyasa. She said she was from the Pleiades. She conversed with him in his native tongue, Swiss German, which apparently the Pleiadians have the capability of learning whatever languages they're speaking to with the Earth population. But just in case there was a problem, she had a translator. And the translator was something now we can put on our phones and it'll translate language to language. So they had that. And some of the communication was telepathic. That's how it began. And then it continued and still continues today. We got involved, my husband, our associate, Tom Welch, and Wendell Stevens got involved in 1977. Wendell Stevens brought this case to us. He was a retired lieutenant colonel from the Air Force. And he showed us these photographs, and my husband and I looked at each other and went, they're too good to be true. They're just perfect. So we sort of backed off of it and said, no, we're not interested. We don't want to look at this. But the reason that Wendell brought it to us is we had a company called Intercept. And Intercept worked with Fortune 500 companies all around the world, financial institutions around the world. We did investigations. We made certain that their communications were protected and they weren't eavesdropped on or wiretapped. So we had this reputation we'd worked hard for, and we didn't really think it would be wise to throw all of that away on a UFO case. We backed off of it. Wendell brought it back to us and said, no, you got to go over. I went. It's amazing. You got to go. So we had business in London. From there, we decided to pop into Switzerland for a day. Lee, my husband, very left-brained, analytical investigator, figured he'd go in and in one day figure out how it was all being done and we could leave. Well, we were there 5 days. We gathered all kinds of evidence. Meier gave us photographs, movie footage, the audio recordings of the beam ship, as they call it, the spacecraft, and also metal samples. we came back to the States with that, and we began a 7-year investigation. And we traveled the world going into laboratories such as Boeing Labs, JPL, Scripps Institute, USGS. We were all over the place because all of this material had to be viewed by what we felt were the experts of the time. So we went to the best labs available. I have to say, most of them went, UFOs, are you out of your mind? Now step back in time. This is the 70s. People weren't quite so open to the subject then. But we could eventually converse with them enough so that they would say, all right, we'll take a look at it. The end result was not one of them could duplicate what Meier had presented to us. No one has been able to duplicate any of it, much less all of it. So at that point, we decided, okay, it's time to just put this information out there, as an investigator would do, and let people make up their own minds. It's not our job to say it is real or it isn't real. Meier is the only one that has that truth. It is our job to present our findings, and then everybody can decide.
That's so interesting. Why do you think the universe chose you to do this? Like, why did he choose you? Why were you chosen to do this important mission?
I don't know, other than both Lee and I had just extreme curiosity about anything that was unusual. So we knew we could do a good job on it. And I'm sure they probably knew too. Just as they had chosen Meier, they watched him for a period of 10 years before they decided that they could contact him. They wanted to make certain his frequencies, as they said, his vibrations would be compatible with theirs. I'm sure that they monitored us too, and I'm sure that that's why Billy turned all of this material over to us.
So that's really fascinating about the metals that were found and the fact that they couldn't be duplicated. You know, we got some information that bismuth crystals, which is this beautiful, it's 86 on the periodic table. It's my favorite crystal because it's fractal in nature. Now these are human grown in a lab, but it's the same principle, and that has been shown to be part of ships.
The interesting thing about Meier's metal was it was metal and it was crystal and it was metal. So it was very, very unique that way, the way it was composited. At that time, we couldn't do it. We had to melt everything and pour it. This was a cold fusion process. And the original person that came in to check out the metal was Dr. Marcel Vogel. He in turn brought in 42 other scientists to work with him. The thing that fascinated me, and this was my moment of truth when it came to the evidence that this is something that could not be duplicated. The metal had thulium in it, and thulium is a rare earth element that is very costly to extract, and it is very rare. How would Meier know to put that in a metal, and how could he create a cold fusion process, which we could not do at that point in time?
That is so fascinating. So what you're saying, it was metal, crystal metal?
Yes.
How big was this piece? Was it like this piece?
Oh no, it was tiny. We had to be very careful with it because it was about the size of a pencil eraser. That was it.
Yeah.
And so we had to, make certain that it was separated properly, and we didn't use it all up so that we would have some for later testing.
Wow, that is just so fascinating. How long did he wait before he contacted you from the point of the original contact?
Well, he didn't contact us. Wendell Stevens is the one that brought us in. It was about a year and a half. We went to Switzerland right after he moved into the farm. He had been a caretaker. He had lost his position. and he had decided to stop being a caretaker and just be a farmer. And Billy's a great guy. He's very earthy, very humble. He's not wealthy by any stretch of the imagination. When we got there, they didn't have indoor plumbing. They were hauling water in and heating it on the stove to wash dishes and wash themselves. He's just a really centered man, has a unique kind of openness about him. He never shied away from questions we asked him. We would sit up all night long around his kitchen table talking. Anything we asked, he answered. He was very receptive to everybody that came over. And that created some problems in his life because people were banging on his door at 3 o'clock in the morning, demanding to be heard. And they had something they wanted to say and something they wanted to hear from him. It finally got to the point that Billy just said, I want to break the contacts. And Lee sat with him all night, talking him out of that. When he finally decided he would continue the contacts, he made a rule that, all right, if you want to talk to me, you got to work in the fields with me. And that seemed to work really well.
That's really beautiful. That's really beautiful. So I love that you say that your main driving force was your curiosity, that you were curious about things that stick out, and that's same with me. I was just writing my talk for a visa and I was like talking about my essence because we're doing a purpose lab and my essence is to like stick on the glitches in the matrix and say, why did this happen? What happened here? Why did that happen? Let's do this again, But what were your initial questions to him? And what made you curious about this extreme anomaly? Because you wouldn't have had any experience with it before it. So what came to your mind as your curiosity with him?
Well, I think our initial questions were, why Meier? Why was he selected? And he told us that, like I just told you, he had been monitored for 10 years. And then they decided they could communicate with him. They did use a female contact for the initial contact because they recognized that the men of Earth were less hostile to females. So that was the point there. We wanted to know more about the Pleiadians. Why were they here? They told him that the biggest reason that they felt they needed to be here was to let us know we are not the only thinking beings in the universe, that we had to move away from that concept that we're all there is, because there's so much more. And as this book is the 45th anniversary edition of volume 1 and 2 together. And when you look back to 1978 when the book first came out, and you realize we didn't have all this technology we have today. We didn't have telephones that take incredible pictures. We didn't have Photoshop. We didn't have personal computers. None of that. So Meier didn't have access to that either. And looking back at it now, I think the case is even more profound because that is so strongly evident that there wasn't the ability to manufacture and create. Industrial Light and Magic was just getting off the ground. It was a baby company back then. So yeah, it's very interesting. You got to forgive my voice, guys. I've got a lot of allergy stuff going on.
Oh yeah, I was noticing that. Well, thanks for joining us regardless. That's so
My
cool.
pleasure.
So I get that's a very interesting part about this, because in reading about this case in this book, that is what they say. It's like, well, this was before all that stuff, so we weren't manipulating, all the,
Right.
videos and stuff. And then this guy himself he didn't even have running water. He's a farmer, so he wasn't even in his milieu of like,
Right.
of his skill set,
Yeah.
So that's interesting. So was he completely remote? And can you describe how they would make the contact with him? Like, what would he go walking outside? Like, what actually, how did it go down?
Well, usually he would get that cooling sensation, like I said, across his forehead, and then hear a voice directing him. Sometimes he went out on the moped, sometimes he walked, sometimes he got on the tractor and he followed their directions to wherever they wanted to meet him. One of the intriguing things about the contacts is we made a documentary film in 1982. It's getting ready to be released the end of this month. But when we made that documentary, we were using gamma radiation detection equipment that was from a company called Wild Heerbrug. We went to the very first contact site, and the site was hot still. And they had told Billy that, and this was early on, back in 77, I believe, that they had to get rid of the first craft they were using because it was leaking radiation. And they brought in another variation so that it wouldn't harm the plants and humans and things like that. Still, all those years later, the first site was hot. Then we measured Billy's moped. It was hot. His belt buckle was hot. It was reading so high that the gentleman that was working the equipment for us said, we need to call in the Swiss nuclear people. And we convinced him not to do that because we knew they'd shut down the film and everything else. So we said, no, please just wait. And that was kind of surprising, but I think it just says something to the fact of what the Pleiadians also told Billy. They are like us. They are evolving. They are not perfect. They are constantly going through their practices of growth, just as we are.
That's very interesting that that was their message, that, hey guys, you're not the only ones here.
Yeah.
And that's so interesting because, you know, we were interviewing Steve Farrell of Humanity's Team, and he said, look, we are in a new Galileo moment. And he said, Galileo said, oh, no, wait, the whole world doesn't revolve around the earth revolves around the sun. And people were like, what? No, house arrest, you know, like he was like completely shut down.
Yeah.
At least he was on house arrest and not killed, but still,
right.
It was like, so this idea was very dissimilar to what you're saying. It's like, oh, hey, wait a minute, we're the top dog, you know, and Avi Loeb talks about this too, and talked about this in the interview. Like, are you kidding me? Like,
yeah.
Of course we're not the only ones. Like, that would be really ridiculous to even think that. So, but
people do.
There's something that gets to happen between the intellectualization of, oh, we're not the only ones in this galaxy or what, etc., to actually meeting with them, talking with them, interacting with them, you know, and all that stuff. So what do you think that's going to be like? I mean, when we actually start living in that reality,
when we recognize it, because I think many of us are living in that reality now. There are a lot of people that are having experiences, whether it's a sighting, whether it's a face-to-face, whether it's a telepathic communication. I do believe there's much more going on than what we are aware of. I think when it happens en masse, when more and more people are aware of this, I think there will be many of us that will want them to cure our ills, to solve our problems. The Pleiadians told Billy they're not here to do that. We have to learn from our problems, and we have to grow with that learning that comes about. So that's something they want to watch us develop. They think of themselves as our big brothers and big sisters, because they say their forefathers were our forefathers and they helped seed this planet. But in the whole process of all of this, they want us to grow. They want us to be prepared for what's out there. And we're looking right now at going to Mars, setting up bases again on the moon, setting up bases on Mars, and then it's off into the universe. We've got to be in a position where we're not carrying our baggage, our earth baggage with us, where we are so wrapped up in anger and frustration and hate and all of those things that are tearing us apart now. We've got to be more centered. And that's something they really feel is very important for us as the collective humanity of this planet. We have to grow through that phase and get out of it and learn to communicate, learn to explore different ideas and not take offense because someone else has a different view than you do.
Yeah, that's interesting. Because, well, I mean, I guess I'm just going to say this, like Steve Farrell, who was the one who was saying we're in a new Galileo, was also saying, hey, wait a minute, we're all one. Like we're tied together, we're all one. So in a sense, when we argue with other people, we're arguing with an aspect of ourselves that
Exactly.
is a different experience. Which is just like mind-blowing. It's like, wait a minute.
It is so true. And it's important to realize that because it may not be the topic you're arguing with, but it could be the concept. So, whether it's you're fighting over, I don't know, whatever, it may not be that specific point. It might be something bigger, or it could be something smaller. But the point is, we don't need to fight because we are all related, because we are all part of creation. We need to respect each other more. We need to have more of a concept of unity as the quote family of man, but we need to have our individuality at the same time. And if we're curtailing another's individuality, we are also curtailing ours.
Yeah, and that's, I think, the message that I was trying to get at before, with the fact that there's going to be a lot of species and they're going to look totally different than us. And so are you going to have prejudice over the mantis beings? Are you going to have prejudice over the blue beings? Like, how is this all going to work?
Right.
And, it's interesting that they're saying that we are ETs. And my 10-year-old son, a couple of years ago, he's like, oh, are we ETs to other aliens that live on other planets? Technically, we would be. And technically, if we're children of some other ET race, is what they were saying. And what some people are claiming is that, hey, we were genetically created by some advanced civilization, and the Pleiadians are just one up from us. There must be other, right?
Sure.
So that's so interesting, and that can help us not have prejudice to them, because we just look a little like
all of us look different, which is great. But we have to understand too that if the Pleiadians were one group that seeded Earth, there have to be other groups too. And when you start looking back through history and you start finding the correlations to what they call the Star Brothers or Star Family, and how these beings came in and taught them something, gave them something to better themselves, such as the knowledge of farming, or maybe the knowledge of how to create an observatory, things like that. It wasn't that they cured the problem, they just gave them a nudge in a direction that they needed to move forward in. And if so many other civilizations out there exist, and the Pleiadians told Billy there are 108 that, and this is back in 75, that were visiting us then, just think what it's been through our history and think about the different individuals that have come to this planet and perhaps seeded it.
That is so fascinating that there's 108, because that's a huge number for me and everyone else, because it's the number of Amazons. That is so fascinating. So I want to talk, before we talk about the film and where to find it and where it's going to be out, when was the last time he had contact, and how did the message evolve?
Wow, the message has continued. Billy does have face-to-face contacts, but he also has telepathic contacts. And so he's he has both. And what he does is after a contact, he goes back and he writes down what was discussed, the conversation, and it's through telepathy that they sort of replay the entire conversation for him. He has created journals that we call the contact notes. They've evolved over the years from the standpoint of initially trying to teach him how we can better ourselves as humanity, as a big group. And now they've gotten into even more of that. They talk about, things like creation. They have done some forms of prophecy because they have an event clock. So I don't know that I'd call it prophecy. But they say in their event clock, if event A happens and event B happens, then event C is bound to happen. But if A happens and B doesn't happen, C won't happen. So that's how they sort of look at what's happening. We had some experiences with that while we were there. We were in Switzerland at the airport. We came back to the Meier farmhouse, and there was on the TV screen this big cross and dirge music playing in the background. We asked Billy what was going on because we had heard that Anwar Sadat had been assassinated. And we asked him, and he says, they're telling people the wrong things. They're saying it was one man that assassinated Sadat. He ran into his office, came out with this big blue binder, opened it up, and found a passage where it said Sadat would be assassinated during a military parade, and it would be by a number of individuals. And so Billy was telling us what the news finally reported the following day.
That's interesting, right?
Yeah.
So did he give you guys access to all of those journals, or was
Yes.
it?
Yes. Yeah. We brought them home. We looked through them. We read them. In the book, in UFO Contact from the Pleiades, and in the documentary film of the same name, there are many quotes in there from the Pleiadians. And the primary contacts at that time were Samyasa, Quetzal, and Ptah.
So I have another question, but let's talk about the film since we just mentioned we would. Where
Okay.
are people going to be able to watch this? Where can they look for it?
Beyond Words is bringing it out. It will be available on Amazon as a DVD, and then the streaming services for it are being set up now. So I'm not 100% where it will be streaming, but I do know that that is the plan, to bring it out on DVD and then to come in with the streaming services. It's a great documentary because you're with us, the investigators, as we go into Switzerland, as we go through all of the evidence, as we go through, I don't know how many laboratories and examining the sounds and the movie footage and the photographs and everything else. You get a firsthand look at Meier. You get to see what type of person he is. It's really good too, because it also brings out the witnesses. There have been many, many people that have witnessed what's gone on with Meier. They've seen craft, they've seen him vanish, they've had all kinds of experiences there. And this has been something that we were really pleased to be able to do, is bring their statements forward as well as all the documentation.
So when he disappeared, what happened there? Was he taken on the ship? How did it work at the missing time?
Oh, I can tell you a story there that's rather interesting. My husband Lee was up on the roof with him, and Billy has a house that is Swiss house, big pitch on the roof. And they were patching it because they had had a little bit of a leak. Billy was on the left-hand side of Lee, and the ladder was on the right-hand side of Lee. So Billy would have had to have walked in front of Lee to get to the ladder, and that was the only way down. Lee turned around to talk to him, and Billy was gone. Several hours later, he came walking down the road, just as happy as could be, and he said, yeah, they came and got me. Lee was not aware that he was removed until he turned around. And many people have had that experience with Billy, that he would be there 1 second and then gone the next.
Sorry, that is so fascinating. That's so fascinating. So this next question, it's interesting because we know that ETs have been coming into our 3D reality,
Right.
because we have craft retrievals and we have
Right.
all this stuff happening, right? But my question to you is does he see it? How do you see it as being an interdimensional phenomenon? And how does that work between the dimensions of, I guess now that I think about it, it's all physical. The dimensions are probably frequency locked places.
Exactly.
So it's not really like, I guess, yeah, now that I think about it, I guess it's not one or the other, it's both. But anyway, how does that work? How did he say that works?
Well, he was talking about the fact that you, and he talks about reincarnation a lot, but as you go through incarnations, you develop into these other areas. But he says that the interdimensional aspect of it, they still have a frequency that we would recognize on Earth and can tap into. So interdimensional beings can be seen physically. The Pleiadians, their vibration is just slightly askew from ours. So they have the ability to be seen. They don't like to be around humans. They say that humans have something called auric stench, which is, yeah, I know it's a great term. It's the negative energy that we carry with us. And so they can only be with us for a little while before they start feeling nauseous and not feeling well. And that's why they don't visit that often.
That's so interesting because we feel nauseous when we have communication with them because it's also like too high vibration.
Frequency, yeah. But, also we have, if you really look at it, we have that same type of reaction with people, general people. You can walk into a room, you know who you gravitate to, and you know who repels you. And so it's becoming more and more in tune with that inner knowledge, whatever you want to call it, intuition, whatever. There's so many things to call it. But it's recognizing that's coming from the heart, the spirit, letting that, sort of guide you as you go through things. And that's what I tell people that are worried about having negative experiences with extraterrestrial life. I don't think they're here to take us over. I think they would have already done that. But I know that just like here, not everybody out there is really good. So follow your heart, follow your spiritual feeling, what that gut says, and move with that. And if you don't feel good about something, avoid it. And you have free will. You have the right to say no and stop.
Yeah, I think that is a great point. And we always tell people to, you're incarnated, you're in this world, and you get to call the shots.
Right.
And it's good to voice it out loud and say, like, you do not have my permission to contact me while I'm sleeping or whatever it is.
Exactly.
Or whatever, because that's really cool. So one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to share the screen for a second. About the film and things, this would be a good way for you guys to get on Brit's mailing list. So if you go to britelders.com, she's got all these books she's written and ghostwritten, and we may have time to get into some of these cool books. And if you go up to Watch the Skies giveaway, we still have time till July 1st. So you can just enter here, and that way you're going to find out when her film is coming out. Here's a little bit about it as well. So I also want to tell you guys that a week from we're going to be going, as I mentioned, to Ibiza to meet with some of the most incredible scientists in consciousness right now, including Cassandra Vitton. She was the lead at IONS Research Institute for many years. She's now at the Arthur C. Clarke in Imagination Center. The head of Google strategy in AI, Sarah McCrum, who's doing incredible work with regenerative agriculture. Chamonix Jane, who you all know, she basically proved that Reiki and meditation actually worked from a very scientific level. Scarlett Lewis lost her son in a shooting and has created this entire movement called Choose Love, where it's in schools all over the world, and she's teaching forgiveness and all these different things. Also, we're going to have Lynn McTaggart there, and we're going to be doing an intention experiment. And I want to highlight what Lynn is doing right now, because this is something that we've also been doing recently, which is using intentions, not only to cure things, but actually, where does she have it here? Sorry, I should have pulled this up before, but she's actually doing something called Revolution 8, which this is idea that we can actually will into existence things that will support our communities re-envision the world. And is very powerful. And it's something that we've been doing with the Dream Machine at LightNet, which we're going to tell you more about in the coming months. We are going to be launching the Purpose Lab. This is our collaboration with Holo Movement. Now, Holo Movement is this idea that we need to come together. It's not a company. It's not a nonprofit. It's a network of networks of all these incredible people, Club, DAO, all these incredible organizations that are saying, hey, we're all one. Let's work together to envision the world we want. So you guys, this is a good place to go, Holo Movement.net Purpose. I'm going to pass it to you, where you can find out when the podcast goes live next week. And you can also sign up to find your purpose. You can lead a group. You can share your story. And for the first episodes, we have Chamonix Jane. We have Richard Rudd of the Gene Keys, who's absolutely incredible. His work is some of my favorite work. We've also, this is it. And he talks about how doubt leads to inquiry, that, if you're doubtful about what your mission is, that's actually good, because at some point that doubt will give way to certainty. And that's where you lean into your own curiosity. So I just want to highlight that on May 26th, Susan Schatzer is going to teach people how to contact past loved ones. You can find this on starseedacademy.org/calendar. This is one of my favorite things that I'm sorry to miss it, but this is really, really cool, because it's getting your telepathy, ready to talk to ETs, but also to talk to past loved ones, because they're definitely right here. And we are going to be doing the masterclass that follows up with Kalina Malnar, who's doing light language and all these things. And she's talking about alignment and your truth. And this was such an incredible interview, because I think it's really where we all need to be. Because when we're in our alignment, where we feel good and feel at home with what we're saying and what we're being and what we're thinking, magic happens. And so this is a Starseed Academy collaborators workshop. So you want to join if you haven't done that, to do that. We'll be coming back from Ibiza and doing spoon bending, which is going to be a lot of fun. And whoever wants to come to Sedona, Ashley, our beloved teacher, professor, is teaming up with Gabrielle, who's this incredible singer and sound healer. And they're going to be doing all the hikes to all the vortexes, healing, past life regression, mediumship, all the things that you guys are interested in and want to know more about, but it's going to be in person, which is going to be really, really cool. So that's all the announcements I have, and I'll share the links in the chat. But we also want to ask the members here to go ahead and bring out your questions that you want to ask Britt and we will pull you up to ask them. Now, let's talk a little bit before we open it up about these other books that you've written, because you were talking about the climbing the mountain book, you were talking about the autistic book. Let's dive into some of these things that have chosen you to be written and why you think they're so incredible. Even the book about moving, you know, they say that moving is is as stressful as getting a divorce and all this stuff. Like, it can be really stressful. And this is, so that's something that just came out. So yeah, tell us a little bit about all your books.
Oh, I love to write. I believe that curiosity propels creativity. And I let life lead me. It brings these wonderful topics to me that always teach me something. With the moving book, my friend had moved 29 times in 40 years, and I haven't moved at all. I mean, I'm stuck here, I think. I love it. And so we decided, after talking to some people, that this book really needed to come out to help people remove some of the stress that they go through while they move. And it's full of lists and places you can make annotations to things that you have to do, need to do. And then I just finished one not too long ago with Deanette Wells, who is an extreme adventure sports woman. She's climbed the 7 summits. She's raced all across the world. And it is such a powerful, profound book. Her son died in an extreme sports accident, and it's all about her journey through that, as well as her journeys on the mountains and across the deserts and every place else. I wrote a great book with Dr. Mark Mancola, The Way of Miracles, and it's about self-healing and raising your vibrations. And then I wrote another one, Finding Your Place on the Spectrum, with Jude Morrow, who is an autistic young man, quite brilliant, just a love. I've written so many, and I love all of them, and they have all taught me something. And that's important to me. I've written with attorneys, I've written with MDs, NDs, people that have just had amazing experiences. One of the books that I co-wrote was with my husband. It's called Expeditions, about his time in South America, living with the Chihuahua Indians down in Ecuador. So yeah, I learn from everything. And I feel that if I can do that, if I can learn something new every single day, I'm doing what I need to be doing.
That's so beautiful. What a beautiful life. What a beautiful, I love it. I love it. I love it. Can you talk a little bit about the autistic man that you thought you said was brilliant? Like,
Yeah.
you know, we interviewed Susan Miller, who's coming out on the Purpose Lab podcast, and she actually works with autistic children and through adulthood. And they seemed, from what she was saying, highly advanced. Like, they would take,
They are in many ways, yes.
And they would go places and she would see things. Like, it was absolutely advanced human stuff.
Yeah.
What's the book? What are some of the key points, and what did you learn from him? And what do you think about autism in general?
Well, I think that we don't understand enough about it. I think a lot of times these people are working on different levels that we're not really corresponding to because we're so trapped in the physical world. Jude he's just a love. I mean, he can be cantankerous. He has all of this stuff, but he has taken his autistic life and he has made it wondrous. He has accepted himself as he is, accepts others as they are. He tries to tell them to find them, what's going on in their heart. That's important to him. He's got a lot of friends that are on the spectrum. He brought them in to make comments and tell stories. But it's basically Jude's life, what his parents did to help him, the different programs that didn't work that curtailed his ability to progress as an individual. And then eventually, he's married now. he has children, and he is still writing, and he's creative, and he's curious, and he's working, and he's doing all the things that we do. But he found a different way of doing that, and that is tapping into himself.
A lot of questions coming in on the different YouTubes. Thanks to New Realities, thanks to Portal to Ascension for co-broadcasting with us. So I want to ask the members here, and thank you so much for supporting LightNet and the work we're doing in the Starseed Academy. We are about to launch our Season 7 Academy, which is going to be remote viewing, waking-induced lucid dreaming, intuition, and also channeling artwork, which is going to be incredible. I just dropped a link in the chat for you guys, or I will now, which will allow you to get into the launch waiting list, the launch list, to give you guys more information. Now, do any of the collaborators on the call back in the Zoom room have any questions for Britt? So one of the questions we've got, yeah, raise your hand. Okay, cool. Betsy, cool.
Britt, you're so adorable.
You guys were over the YouTube, but if you want to get in the back end, you just go to starseedacademy.org/join and you can jump in the back. But welcome, Betsy. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. Thank you both. Y'all are both delightful, Britt. So privileged to be in this space with you.
Thank you.
I heard a comment you made about they hate. I didn't hear the whole thing. I wouldn't be bringing it up. Did you get a nickname called the Eyes from the Pleiades? Can you elaborate if they have a little nickname for you, or you do know? Am I making this up, or?
Well, that's interesting. No, I don't. No, I'm just Britt. I don't have a nickname.
Okay.
I don't know where that came from. That's interesting.
I'm so sorry.
No, don't apologize, please. What I find interesting about things like that is, I think sometimes, and this might sound funny, but I think sometimes we hear with our heart and not necessarily with our head. And I think you might have been picking up on something else.
Yeah. Okay. But and you know, Billy accepts his life as it's fulfilling a mission.
Yes.
And I just applaud you for bringing attention to what I think is important, because humans are idiots. And the broader message is, yes, they love us, but boy, we sure do make some bad mistakes, don't we?
Yeah,
we do the same thing over and over. And I'll be quiet now.
You know, apparently they've made some pretty bad mistakes too, because the Pleiadians did not start in the Pleiades. Their initial homeland was in Lyra, and they had what we would consider a nuclear war. They destroyed their planet. Fortunately for them, they could get off their planet and go to the Pleiades and the Hyades and other places and engineer planets where they could live. We don't have that capability. We can't get off our planet, and we don't have any backups out there because we don't know what else exists out there. So this is one of the biggest reasons that they were telling Billy that you really have to get in touch with being connected with each other, with communicating, with not fighting all the time, without wars, and began to bring the world together in unity. Not that we're all equal. We are, but we aren't. We do different things, which makes us individuals. But we have to learn to respect each other. And somehow we've misplaced that. And I think that's one of the worst things we have done to ourselves, is we don't respect ourselves enough, and we don't respect others enough.
Profound. True. And the other thing, the Pleiadians, I think that they're worried they'll fall back in a negative state if they're around us. Because that's kind of the stench or the aura that.
Yeah, we make them sick.
Possibly corrupt them.
Yeah, that's our auric stench. Yeah, we haven't outgrown. I mean, we live in a physical place. We we get that, but we don't balance our spirituality and our physical being well enough to be in harmony in ourselves. And so that creates an issue for them. Yes. And it's not just them. I hear it from others as well, that other people that have had contacts and been abducted, that when they're around Earth humans for too long, it just, as Billy says, they turn over in their head, but they also feel nauseous and they don't feel comfortable, and they can feel our instinct towards aggression, which seems to be the biggest problem we have.
Well, I love that you promote him. I can't stop it. I just love that you took this. I don't know how you feel about it, but I just love that you are doing your work and that you
I think
doing honest stuff.
It's important right now. There's a new generation coming up. They need to be made aware of these things. They need to, because they're going to be the ones that are out there in the universe. They need to be prepared and ready, and they need to learn that it is a balance between the physical world, the spiritual world. It's not so much your head. When you think with your head, sometimes you get in trouble. But if you think with your heart and you follow it, and that's your intuitive instinct, I think you're usually good. And I'm not really promoting a message per se, like some people have with different things. I am saying we have to be aware, and we have to develop as humans and be the best possible people we can be.
That's lovely. That's lovely. It's uplifting thing.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I too, Britt, want to honor you for getting in there, for going back after you said no, and then you went back, and then taking it over the world and really getting down to the bottom of it, and then holding it over these 45 years, and then, nursing the film into existence and all that stuff. So this is, I guess,
thank you.
We're not always ready for things, and then we do get ready. Erico has a question here, but if you could turn on your camera, that would be great. I also, what did he say they look like? What was the visual?
Very much like us. When he met Simyasa, she had long blonde hair, very, very fair skin, almost like a translucent quality to it. She had blue eyes and was dressed in a silvery type of material, very much like us.
Very interesting. Okay, Erico, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you for wonderful talk.
Hi, thank you.
Is the person or the Sanjay that Billy has been talking, is the same person as Jason has been meeting and writing about in his books?
Oh, that I don't know. I do know that Simyasa was Billy's primary contact for a number of years. Now his primary contact is Quetzal.
Okay, yeah. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
We've got some other questions in the chat here about what do they say, the Pleiadians say about the other types of aliens? The Greys, for example, was one of the questions that we got.
They haven't specifically identified them and said they're good, bad, or indifferent. They have told Billy that there are other civilizations visiting us, and they have said that some you have to know inside that they're not people, individuals, beings that you want to have anything to do with. But they also said that for the most part, they're very benevolent.
So what advice would you have for people that want to make contact? Part of me is thinking well, if they're sick around one human, imagine if they're in a city. So I guess we really can't be in the city for them. But maybe we really just need to invent something. My brain's going, I'm like, oh, why can't we be in a container where they're not
Right.
What advice would you have for people that want to have experiences like he had?
Well, I know there are different groups that actually go out and try to call the craft in and try to have communication. I have no issue with that. Just use your natural, innate ability to be intuitive, and be careful what you ask for. Because so many people that we found that have had, quote, abduction experiences, when you talk to them, they actually precipitated the contact. It wasn't an abduction. They got out of their car, they walked towards the craft, they looked up, said, my gosh, what is that thing? They're gone, they have an experience. They precipitated it. So be prepared. If you want to have this type of experience, I think you have to be centered within yourself, and you've got to know what you're attracting. Good energy attracts good energy.
That's what I was going to say before, is that maybe if you're, that you'll be attracting the right type of.
Right.
Yeah. So this is so interesting because, like I said, the interview right before you was all about listening to your heart. You really, that's gotta be the compass here, because it's going to be much more reliable for you. Then you get in a fight between your logical head and your heart, like, we're not doing that. We're not going up to that person and talking to them. We're not quitting our job, like, whatever, it's like, so it's interesting.
It's learning how to balance the two. It's really responding to that heart energy, because that's never going to mislead you. But it's recognizing, okay, your brain has a say in it, but it doesn't control it. So that should make the debate a little easier on both sides.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Oh, I was just going to look at the exact title of this, of your mountain book, because I want to ask you about that. Another step
Up the mountain.
Yeah.
Yes.
So tell us about that and what you felt was so interesting about that experience of writing that book.
I really resonated with Dianette. She had lost her son in an accident that was extreme sports. He was he was really into anything that meant jumping and flying. That's what Johnny did. And an amazing kid, had always been pushing that edge of the envelope. He didn't need his mom or his dad to teach him that. He knew it from the beginning. Dianette used sports, climbing primarily in the beginning, to sort of support herself and figure out who she was and come through a bad marriage. She did that. Then she just blossomed with extreme sports. She was on Eco Challenge on TV. She did all of these different things. But I resonated with her because she was finding something of herself. She had been in a marriage that was really holding her down, preventing her from finding out who she was. And I know what a difficult process that is, because we all have to go through it at some point. But finding out who you are, it's important to me that I have that growth every single day of myself. And so I could relate to her. I could relate to her losses. It was something that was so touching to me. And it was a way that I felt maybe I could help open her up to her own growth through this writing process. And I really think that happened for her.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Beautiful book. Beautiful book.
Well, I'm going to share my screen again. We have so many events, you guys. I can't even keep track and announcing them all. So this is something that we're doing. This is a brand new program. We're doing it with Altair and Raquel Spring. And this is looking at what she's talking about. Like, who am I really? When you take away all the shoulds, coulds, when you take away all the societal influences, what is there? And they're going to do this as a weekend. So it's a weekend, June 15th. So we're like 3 weeks out. And they're focusing on the Black Moon Lilith, because they say that where you don't feel free and where you get angry and feel rage is the part that's waiting to be set free.
Mm.
So that's where you're not exactly being honest. You're feeling pinned down. You're feeling like your wings are clipped. You're feeling like you're fitting in a box you don't want to be in. All of those things, we have that. And, you know, at Light Now, we're really committed to you guys and your evolution. And we believe that when you're on purpose, you completely change the world through your consciousness, through your joy. Like Britt, like you're excited. You can tell that you're excited to get up in the morning because you want to see what you're going to be doing next. What are you going to learn next? What are you going to write next? What are you going to film next? And we're really committing to you guys because we're doing a 3-month weekly program to walk you guys through hand in hand in small groups of 8 to identify where your power is, your creation power is. And then we're going to do in September, right after we get back from Japan, where Erica was just here, we're doing Contact Japan. So
Right.
you guys who want to head over to Japan, we're going to be announcing that probably this week on the site, starseedacademy.org. But then we do this second weekend and we say, okay, let's look at your South Node and your North Node and figure out what your true purpose is. And again, we're going to be manifesting with you. You're going to have 8 people on your team for 3 months, figuring out what is your next step. Are you starting a business? Are you going to read Akashic Records? Are you going to start a new therapy? What are you going to do? And those people are going to strategize with you so that you're free and happy and living what you came here to do. Because
it's really wonderful. Congratulations.
yeah,
Great.
yeah, we really feel like getting 8 people together that are there to support you
Yeah.
over time, whether it's 8 weeks like we do in the academy, or whether it's 3 months like we're this new program, is you can't fall down.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like your judgy, coworker. It's not like your judgy friends that don't understand. It's not like you're going to get, as Scott used to say, it's the grandmother in disguise. You're going to get a team of people with you in it, trying to do the same thing you're trying to do. And we're going to take you from not having done it to having done it, guaranteed. Because
Very
with that
good.
much intention and that much support and that much love, you will, you will succeed.
Right.
And we will succeed in setting up this structure to help people to do this. And that's the whole point.
That's beautiful. That's great.
Yeah, thanks. It's been a long time coming getting this whole platform together and doing all these programs, but it's coming at the right time because you guys are going to be half your impact if you're having to mince words, say things that you don't want, do things that you don't want. Your impact, your joy, your future is going to be turned down. And it's scary to reorient yourself to your truth.
Mm-hmm.
And to listen to your heart. It's scary. That's why we're going to do it together. That's why we're going to do this together, is because, sometimes, I go through this all the time. I'm like, really? I have to do this? This is scary. And then you do it. And once you leap, you get caught. But you do have to leap. And that's the terrible thing about it.
It's doing the inner work. That's what's important. I mean, all this other stuff is exterior, but you got to do the inner work.
Yeah. So, Britt, what would you want to do if someone said, do you wait for projects to come to you, or do you ever, like, in your mind go, oh, I'd like to write a book, or I'd like to start researching about X or Y?
All of the above. Projects come to me, publishers come to me, agents come to me and say, I have an author that needs help. Would you help? If I can connect with that person and feel like I can do something to help them, I'll take a look at it. If I don't feel a connection to that person, then I just suggest there's somebody better than me. and it's not the right project for me. I write for myself all the time. I've been writing since I was 8 years old. I finished my first novel that year. And I decided at that point, I don't like fiction. I'm into nonfiction. I'm into fact. And that's sort of been my love and passion ever since. And I enjoy learning. So there's just not enough time in the world to learn everything you want to learn. And it all comes to me. I really don't have to look for it. But I'll wake up in the morning and I'll have dreamt. You were talking about your lucid dreaming program. I will have dreamt something that I'm going to write, and it just flows out. It's beautiful. So yeah, there's a lot of different things, but I write literally every day.
That's fascinating. In all this work that you've done with the ET stuff, have you ever wanted to have contact yourself or had contact yourself? Or
I haven't had contact. I would love to sit down and have a dialogue, just have a conversation about where we can go from where we are, because we are, I think, at a precipice. We are at a sort of a cultural shutdown all around the world right now, with everybody thinking I'm right and you're wrong. How can we overcome these things? What could they suggest to us to better ourselves so that communication exists again, so that less judgment exists? And with that less judgment, we develop more respect for each other. Does that make sense?
yeah, exactly. And it's interesting because maybe if you pose those questions, they'll come to you in a dream or something like that.
Right.
Because, it would be interesting to have you be able to ask these questions,
I would love it. I would love it. Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite books that I will recommend to you is a book written by two women called We Are the Octurians. And they
I've
were
read it.
writers.
Oh, yes, I've read it.
Yeah. It was like this anthropological thing where they'd be like, did we write this right? And they were like, no. Hard, so they were channeling it and
Right.
having the conversation. And the Australians were like super specific, like, no, you got that line wrong, and they were very dedicated and very,
Yeah.
ridiculous about it. So it's interesting because, the mechanism for doing this kind of stuff exists,
Yes,
but
it does.
it requires a lot of patience. Well, thank you so much, Britt, for joining us today. Thank you to Kyle for organizing this. It's been such a pleasure, and I'm really excited about this film, and seeing what waves that creates. And it's one of, like you said, one of the most, battle ready cases, ET cases, because there's so much evidence. There's so many people that got involved. There's physical evidence. So it wasn't like, oh, I just got taken. And it's repeated, it's relational. And, Billy's genuine and,
Relevant.
It reminds me of Dwayne, a little bit, that, had contact too. And it was just like, he was just like, yep. I mean, not trying to make it more complicated than it was. He's just like, this is what happened, and I'm really excited for this new age that we're stepping in, because though they don't, according to you, they don't want to give us the answers to the test, because then we won't learn anything and we'll just fall backwards anyway. But I'm starting to really be interested in how we cage our mind.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things we're going to work on, once you guys find your purpose and calling, if you haven't already, is rewriting your brain. Adam and I were talking about this last night. Why do we think that, that we can't make a living in doing what we love?
That's right.
So we're going to reprogram our brains to believe that we can make money doing what we love, because what the ETs are doing is like, they're expanding our idea of what's possible.
Yeah.
with healing or space travel or whatever. And so we're not like, oh, nothing's ever going to change. There's no solutions here. Like, my problem's never going to get solved. They're saying, oh, well, we already solved that in this way, and this is how we do this. So it's like we need to open up the possibilities for our lives through our minds, because that's how you get the result, is first convincing yourself that you can make money doing what you love, because there's a huge tidal wave saying that you can't. There's a lot of you can't.
Exactly. But and part of the problem is because so much of what we love, we look at with the spiritual connection to it. So what you're talking about is spiritualizing money, doing what you love and letting that money have a spiritual basis. Really, really important. Everybody has that opportunity. I mean, my husband would tell me the happiest he saw me is when I'm sitting there typing away, writing something. Yeah, I always had a smile on my face. You can find that within yourself and bring it forward. Absolutely.
Yeah, and there's a lot to be said about, some of the research that we've uncovered with the Purpose Lab is that a lot of people have a small agenda and a big agenda. And the big agenda doesn't include that I need this certain car and I need that. It's bigger than that. It might be a consequence that you get the car, but it's actually bigger than that. And then we've also talked to quite a few famous people, NFL players and all this stuff. And they were like, oh yeah, all the money, the fame, the crowds, the this, the that. But actually, I'm so much happier now because I'm teaching people yoga and like their health thing. And they liked it because they could feel it was more connected, like they could feel the effect they were having. And that's another pattern that we're seeing, that there's a difference between the sugar high and then the deep fulfillment. And the deep fulfillment comes when you're helping someone else, because it's deep fulfillment. I don't know how else to say it. It's like you feel good that you help someone else, and that's really interesting, where you start to, your passion is helping yourself because you're giving your permission to be yourself, to do what you came here to do, to resonate in to live in your happy zone, to live in your purpose. But in that, you also end up usually helping other people, even if it's just to say, wow, she did what she wanted to do. Like she was herself, like, even if it's just that. And really, Britt, again, I just want to say, the stories we tell ourselves is really how far we've evolved. Like that's the basis of it all, of our evolution, is the stories and the movies. That's where it's at. And the music, that's where it's at. And so thank you for telling important stories that make us curious.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Well, curiosity sparks creativity. So if we're curious, we all grow.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think also curiosity helps everyone get to that next unknown, because there's a lot of unknowns that can be very scary. But if you're curious about the next step, somehow it'll come in. And that's where the miracles start happening. Because you're like, well, I'm just going to stay curious. Because when you're curious, your brain is actually not pulling from patterns that are locked and stale and moldy in your head. It's going, well, I'm going to break out of the stale, moldy pattern. And you can only do that when your brain is in curiosity. Fact.
Right.
Fact. So, okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're closing tonight, but please head over to BritElders.com. That's where you're going to sign up to be a winner for her books. And that will also get you on her list, so you know when this film is coming out. This is going to be so awesome. Right. Yes. So thank you again, Britt. Have a beautiful evening, and thanks for coming.
Oh, thank you all. I've enjoyed this. It's been beautiful. Thank you.
Me too. Me too. All right, everyone. We will see you on the other side.
Bye, guys.